In order to understand why feudalism is a type of socialism, you would have to get to the bottom of the definition of socialism. So socialism is defined around political centralisation, and it's defined by the collective ownership or control over the means of production. You know, you'll have socialist sympathisers who will say, but socialism means it's in the hands of the people. Irrespective of whether you believe it's in the hands of the people or not, it doesn't matter. The most important point is the fact it's based around political centralisation and collective ownership or control over the means of production. Now, of course, we understand that socialism in theory is not the same thing as what you put into practice, and it just so happens to be that the socialism the world has seen in practice lives up to the dictionary definitions of socialism, with the state ownership and control over the means of production. Now, socialist sympathisers may argue and say, well, that's nothing of what we hold in theory with regards to what we support with regards to socialism. Maybe they support Marxism, maybe they support the libertarian variant of socialism, or what they believe to be part of socialism. The bottom line is, regardless of what they believe theoretically, the underlying definition of socialism is what you have to stare at. It all boils down to whether you support individualism or you support collectivism. Collectivism is, like I say, it's based on the political centralisation, and individuals' rights are subordinated to the collective. So any system that involves the state being the centre of the economy or political system, any system that involves the state taking control over your economic life and planning production for you and planning out the economy for you, is in relation to socialism. So for example, it's not just defined and simplified around Marxist theory. Yes, that's part of socialism. Yes, socialism's goal ends with communism, and eventually it can't get rid of the private sector and you see fascism, etc, etc. When you look at all of these systems, whether you talk about imperialism, colonialism, fascism, feudalism, theocracy, nazism, all of these systems all have something in common. All put the state, the government, as the centre of the economy. Whether you talk about the collectivist movement of the Soviet Union, or the collectivist movement of Nazi Germany, or even going back to ancient Rome, or ancient Greece, it places the main element as the state, and the purpose of the people collectively is to serve the state. Now again, irrespective of whether people argue against that and they say it's in the hands of the people, the most important point of socialism is that it subordinates the rights of individuals. What you're speaking about with regards to any system, such as for example the feudalism, is you have a king. Now this system was very similar to that of communism, because the king would become the overpower and ruler and planner of the economy. The definition of socialism is based around political centralisation, economic control, and most importantly, it pertains to that of central planning. So everything is based around the plan of production, the plan of who gets what. The feudal system worked somewhat along those lines. Now the reason why a system such as feudalism has nothing at all to do with capitalism is because capitalism is an individualist system. It's about giving individuals of society their own freedom from government intervention, so they're free to pursue their own economic goals and paths. This did not pertain to that of any of these systems mentioned. You could look at feudalism, for example. It was ruled by a king, and the king would rule over everybody else, and what the king said basically went. And if you dared question what the king ordered, you were to be, well, sentenced to death. And this is why anybody who tries to remove capitalism from individualism are completely irrational, because no one in the right mind could remove capitalism from individualism and place it under a word called collectivism, which is synonymous to the word socialism. They couldn't do it for the life of them. They could not do it. Capitalism's got nothing at all to do with, of course, collectivism. It's antinomous to the word collectivism. Once you cut away all these tiny little differences, you know, the theoretical differences between, you know, communism and fascism, etc., etc., and you look at all of these systems that pertain to collectivism, all of them relate to socialism one way or another. For example, every single one of those collectivist systems subordinate the rights of individuals and place the rights of the group above the individual. Every one of them do. Every single one of them, whether you talk about imperialism, colonialism, fascism, nazism, all of them do. It's all based around what the king says goes with feudalism. Again, you could turn your attention back to the 18th century before the Industrial Revolution, when there was the periodical famines. That was a result of the feudal period, because of all the communal ownership of property of land. And through this communal ownership, which again pertains to that of socialism, it led to the mass starvation. Many people died of starvation as a result of it. And it wasn't until, of course, they brought in the enclosure movement to privatise the agriculture, etc., that things began to move more away from this, you know, centralised system. The people never had democracy in those days, and I know that because John Knox was a man who stood strongly against this feudal system. He believed in a democratic right for the people to be able to vote for who goes in power of a country, whereas feudalism was very much the opposite of this. So you have to think of socialism as the root of the tree, in other words collectivism, and from the root of this tree branches off all of these other types of socialism, whether you talk about, you know, feudalism, theocracy, imperialism, colonialism, fascism, nazism, and communism. All of them branch off from the tree of socialism, because they all pertain to that of political centralisation, of collective ownership or control over the means of production. All of them are based around essentially the same meaning in many regards. They just have, you know, these slight differences. It doesn't matter what, you know, socialist sympathisers think about their theories of socialism, because what does that matter? You look at the various different dictionary definitions of socialism. Yes, it pertains to state ownership of the means of production. Every single one of those systems all relate to the definition of socialism one way or another. And a defining ethic of socialism is coercion. You force healthcare, you force education, you force all of these things like agriculture. You use force through the hands of the state. It's a very coercive, you know, system, and throughout recorded history there's only been one individualist system, and that's capitalism. And like I say, they are desperate to remove capitalism from individualism, to place it under collectivism, because they know they can't point to individualism and say, look at the fault of individualism, look what individualism caused with regards to all those wars. Anyway folk, I hope that's been educational for yourself. If you've got any comments you would like to add, anything you would like to question on, you know, what I've said, then of course comment in the comment section below. Like the video, share the video, favourite the video, and of course I shall talk to you later. Cheers.